So my name is Linda Nadal, and I'm the founder of SAYge. And SAYge, we have two more co-founders actually that are on right now and more logging on. We have Grace Liu with us and Susan Dang. Paul McLeod's also going to be joining us. And our team is building a platform that is connecting women with shared experiences in order to exchange the incredible value that we have from our experiences with each other to empower each other. Started these events to really keep the storytelling going and sharing our stories and empowering each other through our stories. So these online events started in the spring in conjunction with the virtual platform, the digital platform, that we have at sagelink.com. And these events we've been trying to do bi-weekly, but at least every 3 weeks or so. And they spotlight women's stories. And the discussions have been incredible surrounding these stories. We discuss the wisdom and the lessons learned from them with each other. And they've prompted some really powerful, empowering and inspiring discussions. This part 2 roundtable is a result of the remarkable response we got from our first SAYge Real Stories event on racial injustice. Our community, and so many members reached out and said they wanted to continue this conversation. So we created a part 2 event, and this is more of a roundtable. I wanted to have a fuller breadth of experiences because there are so many different components to this topic. So from 7 to 8 o'clock, we'll hear from all of our speakers and their stories. And then from 8 to 8:30, we'll open this up for an interactive discussion where I'm hoping to hear from a lot of our participants and hear your voice and your experiences or questions that you may have for our speakers. First, we have Tanya Kirby. Tanya lost her brother several years ago in a police shooting, and will courageously share her story of the confusing events surrounding his death, but also of turning her grief into purpose as she made a mental decision to carry on his name, as she states, by having the drive for two.
Thank you so much, Linda. As always, I appreciate opportunities to share my brother's story because I do believe I have the drive of two. I believe that he's with me. And if he was here, he would kind of thunk me on the head as as his older sister, he would always thunk me on my head and tell me to go for it. And so I feel that drive every morning to take life aggressively. I used to say, that days were typical in my life, but when you have such a traumatic experience, you look at life so differently. You appreciate every moment, every second. And like Linda said, I have intentionally decided to turn that grief into something purposeful. And so every time I'm asked to speak, I automatically say yes. No matter what it does to my schedule, it does not matter, because I believe that there will be at least one person on the call who needs to hear the story. For their life journey. They need to hear something that I'm about to say. And so I appreciate this opportunity to share that for that reason. For whoever's out here who's dealing with grief, or you've dealt with grief and you haven't fully processed it. But I will tell you specifically that I have taken the grief and trauma of losing my brother suddenly through a violent shooting. I've taken that negativity and turn it to something positive. And I'll just briefly share my story because I shared it a little more in depth last time, but for the sake of time, I will just give you kind of some highlights. So unfortunately, I lived very far away from my family in South Carolina. Everyone else was in Virginia, and my brother and his girlfriend, soon to be wife, were in DC. And it was a typical day. Unfortunately, he was driving and he didn't have his glasses on, and he was changing lanes and hit an unmarked car. He later had this car follow him, and because I guess he didn't stop when he kind of scraped the car on the interstate, but they followed him and then they began shooting at him. And so you go from a typical 21-year-old who, he's trying to just get home on a typical day, and he's now involved in someone shooting him and he does not know who it is. And he tries to get out of the way. He tries to get help by running to the nearest residential area, running out of his car, bombarding into someone's house for safety, random person. So, but again, he's scared, he's big, and he's an African-American Black male in this country. And so the couple obviously was afraid, and it escalates from there to the point that he's not leaving the house. These people who we later find out are police in training, who he hit their car, and because he didn't stop, they decided to shoot to kill. And they didn't kill him on the road, but they did kill him in this person's house. And so you don't know what you're going to do if someone is chasing you. You think logically that, oh, I would do this or I would do that. But he's a 21-year-old guy in DC, and you have someone shooting at you and you're trying to get away. And so everything that is logical goes out the window and you're just in survival mode. And so this escalated pretty quick. But what I will say that was more shocking than I would imagine is how he was portrayed in the media. And, you know, my brother was constantly throughout his life, especially when he became a teenager and he grew big in size, he was in football. And so I knew him as a big teddy bear who would wake me up at night and put crazy toothpaste on my nose and, you know, just do things just to annoy me as a sister. But the world saw him as an intimidating Black man, even when he wasn't, even when he was 12, even when he was 13, even when he was 21. And so he was constantly stopped by the police because he fit the description of something. He fit the description of someone who just attacked a woman. He fit the description of someone who stole something in the store. And that was what he carried every day. Now I understand to some degree that some police officers, they have the power, but they don't have the maturity just yet because these were untrained police officers who had guns. And when he sideswiped the car, they felt like he should have stopped. So there's a lot of things that I don't know about the story, but those are the highlights. What I will say is when the story came out to the public, I could not believe how my brother was viewed. He was viewed as a thug. He was viewed as someone who deserved it. He was viewed as someone who was almost inhumane. And so when you look at the media after experiencing something personal, you begin to realize how much sensationalism is infused in our media to cause a lot of prejudices amongst social groups, racial groups. A lot of that is fueled by the media. And I'm telling you that personally because I saw my brother's story in black and white, yet I knew him. And so now what I have done with that grief and what I've done with that pain and what I've done with that sorrow, because that can envelop you. When you don't know the people that you believe are called to protect and serve are the ones that shatter your family, you begin to have a very skewed view of that particular group. And so I was very fearful of the police, very fearful. And I didn't even realize how much it had changed my persona back then. But I mean, just the fact that you can one day wake up and lose a family member to someone, just gunshots, you begin to look at the world differently. And so I had to make some decisions. I had to make some serious decisions on how can I turn my family's pain into something purposeful, to something meaningful. And I intentionally made a decision that my brother will live on through my words, through my life, through my actions. And anytime I get a platform to humanize him, not as a Black man, I mean, all that's a part of him, but as a human being, we're all a part of this global community. So every time I get a platform to mention his name, Travis Hampton, he lives on. He lives on to help other families dealing with grief and pain and sorrow. And so I've done a couple of things since the last time we've talked. One of the things I've done in the face of some other racial injustices that are happening now is I said, you know what, I've always been a creative person. And so I've teamed up with my company and did a Black Lives Matter face mask collection. I'm starting on a book. And I'm doing a couple of things. And this is, you know, I'm not trying to get anybody to buy anything. It's not the thing. But the point is, I'm saying it because you have to intentionally take all of that fuel, all of that sorrow, and focus it, laser beam focus it into something powerful. And so one night after looking at George Floyd, the entire experience, and I looked at it a few times because I wanted to absorb it. And I actually started creating all that night. And I probably created maybe 7 to 10 masks because I wanted people, when they're going about their lives, I want someone to be able to put on their face covering that Black lives still matter, that I matter. Whenever you get the opportunity to take your sorrows and griefs and give it a voice that is full of love, encouragement, and power, I encourage you to do that as well. And one final thing I'll say is I believe that a lot of our racial injustices and social issues right now are because of fear. And I believe that fear is no match for understanding. And so I use my voice to give people understanding. I use my voice to give people encouragement. And I use my voice to, like I said earlier, to allow my brother to live on. And that's pretty much my story. Again, Linda, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Tanya, wow. I mean, I'm personally blown away by how you have recounted this and what you have done and how you're summarizing what, you know, so many of us should do. And this understanding is so much more powerful than fear. I cannot tell you how much I agree with that statement. And thank you so much for coming on tonight and sharing. To India Pierce is our next speaker. She is a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant who will speak with us about the difficult balance she has of navigating her work while sorting out her own personal feelings during this time. She'll touch upon her experiences in what she calls a catch-22 phenomenon, where individuals and organizations are doing just what they think they should be doing. Thank you again, India.
Thank you, Linda, for the invitation, and thank you, Tanya, for sharing that beautiful testimony. I really appreciate it, and just appreciate the fact that this space is being shared for people to have, you know, courageous conversations with one another, people who you might not otherwise meet. So as Linda mentioned, my name is India, and my pronouns are she and her. I sit before you all tonight, Black, woman, queer, femme, a daughter, a sister, a wife, magical, a photographer, an advocate, an entrepreneur, a lover, a creator, a student, an organizer, a researcher, and a fighter who's invested in truth, justice, love, and healing. And I share that list with you because although it's incomplete, I think it's important that I name and make visible those parts of myself that I'm constantly being asked to hide, to suppress, or to negotiate in various situations. It's important that I routinely engage in practices that remind me of my wholeness and my power. And so today we're here to talk about racial justice. And as I was preparing for this and I was thinking about my life, I was reminded that every aspect of my life has been marked by injustice of some kind. And this never ending striving towards freedom in so many ways. Amongst the list of identities I shared, as Linda mentioned, I'm also the co-founder of a boutique consultancy firm named Moxie Consultancy Collective. So Moxie is one of the few women of color owned and led consultancy groups that works globally to provide transformative approaches to support organizations in the creation of socially responsible, anti-racist, and equity-driven workplaces. And I love the work that I do at Moxie. Yet I have found myself in this current moment in what I like to call a beautiful catch-22. And by that, I mean, I find myself not as easily able to navigate the complexity that comes with managing my own personal feelings about the racial injustice happening around me, while simultaneously attempting to usher people through processes to grapple with, understand, and create policies around racial equity and inclusion. And so, as you all might can imagine, in the wake of George Floyd's death and the subsequent uprisings and calls to action, many people have been contemplating, like, what does it mean for them truly to support communities of color and commit to being anti-racist? As a equity and inclusion consultant, this has put my work in higher demand than it has ever been before. And while on the surface, like, it's amazing that so many people are eager to change the culture of their organizations or their social groups, their communities, many people are just doing it out of obligation and optics, and it shows, right? And I think the problem, in my opinion, boils down to performative allyship, and I'm tired of it. It's the trainings with no accompanying changes in organizational policies, or it's the burden of putting the educating and leading of DEI initiatives on already marginalized people. It's asking people to essentially volunteer their time to do the racial justice work within a company without paying them more or without shifting their current workload. It's the constant questioning of whether or not people of color really have it that bad. I actually heard a client say that to me. And these examples are never ending. And with each one, I found myself more and more discouraged. Every time I scroll through my social media feeds or I turn on the news, I'm confronted with more than enough reasons to be discouraged. So being confronted with that in my work on some days was just too much to deal with. And quite honestly, it was disheartening and frustrating. There have been so many times that I've walked away from conversations simply in awe of the ways that white supremacy presents itself. As a consultant, I know that all I can do is lead people to the water. Like, I cannot make them drink the water. And I've had to find ways to be okay with that. And in doing that, it has really helped my mental and emotional state. I had to make the decision that I wanted a different relationship with my work. I had to make the decision that I was not going to leave all of those identities that I mentioned earlier outside of my work, but to ask myself, what would it look like to do my work in honor of those identities? What projects would I have to say no to? What values would I need my clients to share in order for us to have a working relationship that not only prioritizes their care, but my own? And what boundaries do I need to put into place? And most importantly, what truths do I need to share with my clients? And so answering those questions and shifting how I show up has allowed me to move towards greater authenticity in my work. And it kind of sounds small, but it wasn't. It was truly a practice of freedom for myself. So I'll leave you all with this. To me, a practice of freedom is to step outside of restraints and seemingly insurmountable circumstances to engage with the impossible. That which is yet to have been realized, and to demand a moment of freedom for yourself. Those practices, they're necessary strategies upon which we practice self-preservation. So my wish for each and every one of you all on the call is that you find ways, however big or small, to practice freedom in your own lives. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, India. A lot of intricacies in what you said, and I think that I'm really excited to, pose a couple questions to get our interactive discussion going, and I know that you can really contribute, especially to one question that I have. So I look forward to that. Next, we have Tia. Tia Glaive is, as a young Black female in corporate world, Tia will discuss the emotional struggle she has and the difficulties pertaining to racial injustice, especially in corporate America. So at her workplace, Milk Bar, she has helped organize wide forums to discuss current events, and also how her workplace can show up for its communities, as well as she has led the creation of its first employee resource group, creating a safe space for Black employees. She's also created, and this is how we met, an online space called Curated by Tia that aims to help Black and Brown entrepreneurs grow their businesses and really help them have the access to social capital where there's a disparity in this arena. And so we are going to be collaborating a little bit, and I'm really looking forward to that. But I will hand it over to you, Tia, to share your voice with us tonight. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Linda. Thank you for having me. As I thought about my story in corporate America, I actually recently, yesterday, read an article that a Black woman wrote, and she was going through her thoughts of, someone asked her, has she ever witnessed or like personally witnessed, like to her, social injustice? And her answer, she immediately said no, because she felt like she hadn't witnessed anything that has personally affected her. And then she started to think a little bit more on, well, let me re-examine my life, how I grew up, the people I interact with. And she was able to tell her story through that. And I felt like that is a piece of my story, where as I have moved through, particularly in my life, through school, but then also entering into corporate America, for me, it was almost difficult for me to see someone that might speak to me a little bit differently or present different challenges, or maybe it was a little harder for me to get acquainted with the teams. And I really didn't notice that it was because of who I was as a Black woman, as a vocal Black woman, as an educated Black woman, as a go-getter, and a goal-achieving Black woman, that sometimes that was met with different words or different feelings from other people around me. So I want to give you some examples. Growing up in my career, some of the things when I first started corporate America, conversations that I would have with mentors when I first came in, was talking around the way that I should not dress at work. So conversation was, hey, people might not take you seriously if you come to work in skinny jeans because you're curvy. And yes, you're going to see white girls come in that's your same age coming into manufacturing. Black women are more curvy. I understand that. I don't want them thinking about my curves when they need to learn about how I get work done. And then there's other things like working in, when I first moved to New York City, I worked in the Bronx, and I had a vendor actually come in, and we were talking about the space and whatever he was in for, and he asked, where did I go to see? And he was like, oh, I can tell you went to college because of the way that you talk. And he started going through like because you know, some of the people that work here and the people that I run into, they don't talk like you. But it was very clear that he was saying the other brown and Black people around you speak differently. You talk differently, so you must be educated. Actually, someone that worked for my company that was one level up, he was almost trying to rationalize why this person was trying to make these irrational decisions. And the statement that he made to me was, oh, he thinks in a logical way. He's a white man. He thinks in a logical way because he's an engineer. And I said, well, I'm an engineer. Other people in the room, so everyone was like, turn their head, look down. And he did not know I'm an engineer. I work in food manufacturing, food safety and quality in my day job. So most people in that role are not engineers. So that completely threw him off. Also, that man is not an engineer at all, so it's like one of the things where he is trying to say, oh, this person, and he might not even know it's because of who we are, that he's a white man, maybe, I have no idea, right, why he is thinking these things and why he even assumed that he was an engineer. He's never even said that he was an engineer. But for him to tell me that he's thinking in this logical way because he is, and then I'm saying, well, I'm a chemical engineer, and what are you gonna say to that, right? So I think my mission, just being in corporate America, and I am a director at a company, a young director compared to my counterparts in the field. I'm really passionate about wrapping my arms around brown and Black, kids, really, is what I kind of think of them coming into corporate America, trying to figure out their lives, trying to deal with corporate life, but then also what's happening in America right now. And with my group at Milk Bar, when George Floyd died, I'm a happy person. I smile. People, typically don't see me get mad or anything like that. The week George Floyd died was very difficult for me. And I remember just like being in meetings, and I was chipper, but then like me and my husband was talking about it every chance we got. Once, I wasn't on a meeting and we were watching TV, social media, I'm getting kind of emotional because that week was like crazy between work and that. And my job had said nothing that week. And I was at Milk Bar. So, Milk Bar had said nothing. That weekend they posted like, they did a blackout on social media, and they had posted a Black background with like a red heart. And our social media basically like went off, like, this is not enough, all the responses that a bunch of companies got. And then so I did not see that on Instagram. But when we came on Monday, we were having morning meetings every day because of COVID, talking about the business, that type of thing. So on Monday, we kind of came in and our CEO basically like stopped the meeting, said, I don't want to have the meeting today. I want to talk about what's happening in America. And that was really like the first time that tears like started falling from my eyes, because I felt like I was alone, basically, working and all of this happening on social media. I felt like no one really understood at work. And so after she said that, I was kind of crying and like, on mute, right? And people were kind of quiet, but I had, got off mute. At first I was just like, thank you, for saying your words. But then after I kind of calmed down and found my voice, I told that group that the week before was really difficult for me. But it completely changed their view in the sense of, wow, I had no idea. Tia sat on these meetings, smiling, laughing, joking, doing the regular corporate America thing. but she was going through this other thing that we had no idea. Really got them thinking about how are we going to support the people that work for us? And then how are we going to do better about supporting the community? And so after that, we decided to run a series of 6 weeks company-wide forums where we talked about a lot of different things. So we talked about Black Lives Matter and how do we get to this point. We talked about voting, which is really important. We talked about involvement in the community and what Milk Bar has done in the community and what they have lacked doing, or, you know, we really examined ourselves and said that the way that we talk are all butterflies and rainbows, because that's the brand. If you know Milk Bar, that is the brand. But we haven't been as open as we should be. So we have been doing a lot of that self-reflection in the company, and I'm so proud to be a part of it. And just with my experience and, you know, the love that I have for young students coming in, you know, part of our business is retail, and we hire a lot of young people in our retail stores. I'm extremely passionate about them and making sure that they feel supported, you know, so I actually helped create our first affinity group, which I'm super, super proud of. It's something, actually, I've been with the company about a year and a half almost, and it was the first thing that I talked about when I first got here. So to see it come full circle and really see the company grab a hold on it and really allow me to shape it the way that I feel like it should be shaped, and to really notice that there are no affinity groups in hospitality. And hospitality hires a lot of brown and Black people. A lot of brown and Black people. And the fact that they haven't thought about creating these safe spaces kind of blows my mind, right? So I'm kind of learning that all of my HR staff is like, oh, I've never worked with an affinity group before. And I've reached out to my HR counterparts, you know, in other hospitality jobs, and they've never done anything like this. And I'm like, what? So I'll wrap up my story, but you know, that's really a part of who I am. It's a really part of my story. It's a part of how I want to make a difference. Linda mentioned that I recently started Curated by Tia. As more brown and Black people start their own businesses, you know, we really don't know anyone that can design a website, or how do I build capital, or how do I, you know, what do I do for advertisement? I really want to create that link for brown and Black entrepreneurs where they are a part of this collective group, where I would know what they are doing in their business, what they need, and I have specific resources for them that I can connect them with. That relationship building piece, that I know what you need, just like, you know, my kids at work, like understanding what's important to them, understanding what they need, and ensuring that they have a safe space, ensuring that they have the right resources to do whatever they may want to do with their business, with their careers, with their lives. So thank you very much for having me.
Tia, thank you so much for being so brave to share your real uncut story with us, because that's really what this is all about and how we can get the most value from these events. So I thank you for opening up your wounds and sharing them with us. And I just want to reflect on the fact that, you know, the last three women that spoke, you have all, you know, taken your pain and put it into such a constructive, positive motion, and it's really inspiring. Our next speaker, Sonia Harris, actually is going to also touch upon some of the subtleties of racism that Tia did, I believe, in when she shares with us tonight. Sonia is joining us again as a speaker to share her voice on the subtleties that can be found in racial biases and disparities and the consequences of them. She's an award-winning author and educator and mentor who brings light to some of these issues and aims to enlighten readers to make choices that move them forward.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. And thank you again, Linda, for this second coming of Racial Justice Forum. I really appreciate this opportunity. So was it Tia? Did I say that right? Tia, thank you so much for your courageous story. And you echo a lot of the experiences that I've witnessed in corporate America, and just stories that have been told to me. But I always like to say that I feel like I am so unique to this racial, the racial overtones and the racial undertones in America, because I don't feel like I've been insulated from them in corporate America, but I think that it also depends on the culture of the environment where you work. I worked in this brokerage firm, stock market, for many, many years. I was one of a few Black folks there. But I've always asserted myself that I knew who I was when I was in that setting. And a lot of that came from my father's wisdom growing up in the South. And my mom is from Georgia. My dad is from Trinidad by way of Florida by way of Trinidad. But I think just going in, knowing who I was and the potential for some racial subtleties that would make me feel uncomfortable, and also my counterparts feel uncomfortable with my response. So I want to say that, being in corporate America, sitting at my desk one day, reading the Wall Street Journal, one of the senior brokers that I rarely interact with outside of saying good morning, good afternoon, or good night, he stopped and he goes, "Wow, you're reading the Wall Street Journal." He goes, "We're going to have to, he says, we're going to have to get you your own subscription." And he just seemed so taken aback that I was even curious. I mean, I'm employed in that market, so what else would I be doing if I wasn't sitting on the phone talking to my friends during my spare time? So I said, well, yeah, I'm reading like about the financial market. I'm trying to educate myself. And sometimes I always feel that we, when we're educated and when we are assertive, sometimes I wonder if that is intimidating our counterparts. I think oftentimes we as Black people feel intimidated, but we don't think about whether or not we're making them uncomfortable. We don't think about whether or not we're infiltrating their safety zones. Sometimes we just really beat ourselves down and think that, excuse me, that it's just us. It's just something about us. It's something about our skin tone. But we never really think about our counterparts. Like, do they feel uncomfortable? Do they not have the experiences, the cultural experiences, the social experiences, enough of it? Are they not versed in Black literature? Do they have, Black friendships? And, that's very important to know whether or not our counterparts have any knowledge of what Black culture is. So I think this is an opportunity to ask some people, like, what books do you read? Where do you travel? Do you go to mostly European countries? Have you gone to Africa? Have you gone to the Caribbean? Have you ventured into a neighborhood that's outside of your comfort zone or where you live? I think it's really a matter of people having a sense of awareness of their own knowledge and then lack of knowledge about other cultures. And not, but I think that I'm really, being a mom of a 10-year-old daughter, I'm really worried about her being more aware of her skin tone than I ever was. I never really thought about it until now. I walk into places and I'm looking around and I'm like, gee, are these people feeling sorry for me because I'm Black? Are they so far removed from that reality, which is theirs too, because there is such a thing as collateral damage. They could be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Are they even aware of how it can impact their life? Because they're not exactly safe from it either if they just happen to be in that setting where we feel racial injustice is taking place. So I think that it really comes down to knowledge, awareness, and really broadening our horizons around different cultures. And as far as a Black person is concerned, the George Floyd footage was very disturbing. But it also took me back to, I don't know if you all are familiar with her. Her name is Dr. Joy DeGruy, and she has a video, and it's called Post-Traumatic Slavery Syndrome. And it's on YouTube. She has several, and the one I'm speaking about in particular is about 1 hour and 21 minutes. And in that footage, she talks a lot about from the historical context of slavery and how at some point she believes white Americans have been desensitized to the plight and the trauma of Black America. And that came from children witnessing lynchings. And when I got to that point in that video, I turned it off because I said, aha. Because oftentimes I wonder, why does it seem like so many people are insensitive or desensitized to just the fact that someone is being slaughtered with a knee on their neck? When I read comments such as, he should have stayed still, he shouldn't have done this, or he shouldn't have twitched, we're beyond that. Like, this is blatant, like, manslaughter or murder, if you will. What has desensitized society that a Black life to so many does not matter? You know, that's where I'm at with this. So moving away from my experiences in corporate America, I think it's just the everyday interactions and what I see on the news and the stories of police brutality without accountability is in the media promoting it as, oh, well, you know, let's put this person's criminal history ahead of the crime that happened to him or her. And then all of a sudden, the crime that happened to him or her is no longer the leading story. It's that person's criminal history. And that happens more often than not with Black people. Whereas on the other side of that coin, when we have someone like Kyle Rittenhouse, who shot the protesters, he was being promoted as a good citizen who did like a graffiti community service, you know? So it almost, you know, they villainize the victims and make the suspects the heroes, you know, when it's reversed and racist. And so I'm at a place now where, moving outside of corporate America, I'm at a place now where I'm hoping that like minds, as I said before, can come together, raise awareness around our cultural differences, our history, and also for my counterparts, white brothers and sisters, to really look at the history of Black lives in America, and when we were subjected to like white mobs during like the Rosewood Massacre, the axe handle killings in Jacksonville, Florida. There's so many Wall Street bombings, the Wall Street bombing. There's so many traumatic events that has happened to Black lives outside of the police brutality that we're talking about. But for some reason, it just seems to be lost in society. It just doesn't seem to be part of the white history, the culture, and it's certainly not being taught in our schools. So I don't know how many people have heard of these events I'm going to read off, but I really would encourage you to go and read about how Black people have been traumatized for so many years. The first one, of course, we know slavery was brutal and forced immigration into America for profit. The burning of Black Wall Street, the movement of Philadelphia, the Tulsa massacre, the axe handle event in Jacksonville during the segregation, the Rosewood Massacre in Florida, which I actually walked out of that movie 3/4 of the way, and it's a true story, happened in 1923, where mobs of white people attacked a Black town and killed about, I think maybe 6 Black people were killed. But what struck me in that movie was there was a Black man who owned a piano, and his white neighbor, who was downtrodden, was so upset because that he perceived that Black man as doing better than him in life and having more than him. And he really was angry about the fact that the Black man had a piano, he didn't have one. And also the false accusation of Black men, you know, raping white women was a part of it. You know, then the Jim Crow laws, and then fast forwarding to the police brutality with the underpinning of white supremacy. So the white supremacists and the covert government missions to dismantle any semblance of Black empowerment and Black mobility. We're seeing that even with the Black Lives Matter being compromised as well. So there's a lot of work to be done. So please forgive me. I want to move away from feeling like I'm a Black person with a target on my back in America, because I do know some amazing white brothers and sisters. I have white members of my family through relationships. So I know that there's better out there. but I really feel like it's time for us to move forward and educate ourselves about the other side of history that's just not taught, you know, in homes and just not taught in schools. So that's my piece, guys. That's where I'm at. So
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I was at your last talk last time, and I think every time you speak, I feel like I've gone through an educational course where I learn more about things that I have yet to learn about again. Anne's going to share her experience as a woman of I hesitate to use this word, of white privilege, and it's a complicated feeling. There's so much like almost guilt involved in there, but it's the context of being in an interracial family with loyalties to both sides and to insight into both worlds, and how that difference is felt every time they move in where they live, and how it affects the school lives of her children, and how current events have affected her family. So from here, I'm going to hand it over to Anne.
Thank you so much, Susan. And thank you, India, Tia, Tanya, and Sonia. It's a pleasure and quite humbling to follow you all. The last time I spoke, you know, it really does come from a place of white privilege, and acknowledging that I hold this experience that my husband and my children, who have chosen to culturally identify with their Black side, I walk through the world very differently than they do. And, you know, we had such a great talk the last time, you know, based on like my experiences and the things I learned from Tanya and Sonia, and, you know, learning more about biases I may or may not hold, and the view and the journey, and how it's so different. My own core family, you know, my husband and my children, and how I've been able to take that and grow. So I don't want to focus so much on the things that I talked about last time, so much as, you know, things that have happened since, particularly as it does relate to current events and the way.
oh, that's nice.
I'm sorry? Oh, okay. And particularly as it does relate to current events and, you know, things that you see children experience and how it colors their view of the world, you know, going through COVID and having that fear of wanting to leave the home. But then, you know, as they become older, you know, they're now 10 and 12, learning more about the news and hearing more things that happen in the news, and, you know, them of an age where I want them to be free thinkers and I want them to look at the world with a critical lens, and they do, and they express, you know, one in particular, my youngest, you know, expresses his concerns and his fears about the world around him. And having said over the course of the summer several times, like, I don't want to leave the house because I feel like, you know, my life is in danger. And you know, working through that, because I can leave the house without fear, but that's my child's truth. And I cannot, as his parent, strip that from him at all. And, you know, seeing how this is playing out now that school's back in session, and, you know, they haven't been in school since March, and a lot has happened in this world that, you know, children have had to process, for good or for bad. And my 10-year-old being really vocal about how he views the world and what he sees going on between police and the disproportionate rate at which Black people are being killed, and his interpretation of that. And he wrote something on one of his Google Classrooms. All my children are remote learners right now. Just 3 sentences of how he perceived the situation between police and Black people. And he didn't say anything wrong. He didn't call for violence. He didn't talk about the riots. He just said, you know, police are doing this, Black people are affected, and I feel white people are treated more fairly. And that's his truth as a 10-year-old. And somehow some parent in our community saw it. It infuriated them. They chose to screenshot it and share it all across social media with my son's identifying information attached to it. So they didn't even give him the courtesy of just being this silent, unknown voice. It was dragging a 10-year-old, like, completely for no reason other than he voiced his truth, as uncomfortable as it may be for other people to hear, and they essentially wanted him to seek their permission to have these feelings, because for them it all became about, well, this is so inappropriate for a 10-year-old to say, and, you know, now I have to protect my children. And, my whole question was, well, one, you're in gross violation of school policy. You dragged a 10-year-old across social media. And two, what are you protecting your child from? He didn't call out any classmate. He just stated his truth. And like when my children hear uncomfortable things, my husband and I tend to take the tact of, well, what does that mean to you? How does it make you feel? And there's so many ways where we as white parents can have these conversations with our kids without causing harm. And I guess it just stuns me that, a group of outraged parents, when called out on their behavior, doubled down on this 10-year-old and just took that as permission to then continue to share all sorts of things about him that they felt they knew from interacting with him over the last few years in the elementary school. And just seeing, like, this is what we went through 6 days into the school year. And it just stuns me that there's been no growth, no evolution. Since the time of the last talk, both my husband and I got in this group that another parent in town formed called Community Alliance for Racial Equity, where a group of us want to look more critically at the school system. We want to look at the way in which our children are educated. We want to see that education is carried out with a more equitable lens, that the curriculum is more equitable and promotes history fairly and accurately, and not from the lens in which I was taught, which my children want that too. To see like books at the book fair show a diverse group of faces and not just the same few white authors that we always see. So we've been working on that and engaging in dialogue with the school, and then some parents who happen to be teachers in the school system reached out and were like, hey, let's get a book club going. I noticed we're all reading a lot of the same books to educate ourselves and learn about our biases and learn how we can be better allies. So we have our little social justice book club going, and I'm happy that teachers are engaging. But I'm just, I guess as a parent, it's so hard when you're realizing that you're coming from a very different lens than your family, and then to see an innocent child just get dragged for stating their truth. And, even though the school has been supportive of him, to hear the principal even one day say, well, it was an edgy comment for a 10-year-old. And I just kind of quietly said, well, was it? Because it's a Black 10-year-old in a rural white town. That's his truth. And that's not edgy. It's just different from everyone else's. And fortunately, they conceded that, it is his truth, and he has every right to it. And maybe it isn't so edgy after all. I know I can't speak to the experiences of, the other amazing speakers that we have, obviously coming from this different lens, but I can speak from my truth, which is I am an imperfect person. I am doing my best to raise really solid Black children from my lens. And, all I can do is learn every day how I can be better at it, how I can listen to them, how I can understand their truth, and how I can always foster their confidence to speak that truth, even when it feels like the rest of the world is just raining down on them for it. So that's me. Thank you so much for listening.
On standby now to take the podium, Lady Scribe is a Black woman in the entertainment industry with roles as a CEO of SRE Media Group, and she's also the founder of the Seattle Sound Music Awards, which hopes to help end generational poverty by recognizing independent and mainstream artists who are influencing change within their community. Lady will share the real struggle and emotional roller coaster of raising her children in this climate.
Well, thank you, Linda, so much for reaching out. But I just have to say to the rest of the ladies, you guys have me doing these ugly cries and trying to fix this makeup. It's just extraordinary to just hear your candidness, and it's such a safe place to speak. And I just thank you, for creating this space. So for me, I am Lady Scribe. I am, raised in Seattle, Washington. I'm based here still. I am a publicist. I come from, journalism. So before bloggers, where there was fact checking, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing today and a lot of the stuff that the women have spoken about has always been happening. It's just that this is the time that we're actually being able to see it because it's being filmed. and it's being shared. And that's the blessing, of social media. For me, dealing with celebrities, I was always the girl in the picture with the celebrities, like people didn't really differentiate me between the client, but that's my client's fame, that's my client's money, that's my client's life. It's not mine. And in all of COVID and race, wars, really, we say injustice and we come up with all these little cute words, but we were building out a venue, and my 12-year-old daughter was loading in stuff, helping us. We're family run business. She was in there. And because someone couldn't get around the car, it called her nigger. That's what the ER, it's no slang, it's just nigger. And imagine having to stop everything and console my daughter and say, baby, like, I know, I remember the first time I was called nigger, and having to hold her and console her and let her know you're a Black girl in this world. You are growing up to be a Black woman. So this more than likely will not be your first time. This will be your first time, but not your last time. How about that, right? Now, I have 1 girl and 3 boys. And that's why I didn't really want to talk about, what I do. I wanted to really just disclose, because everybody is on social media, they're watching their celebrities, they're, yes, George Floyd, gets killed, but then next thing you know, you're on the stream. If we can get 5, cents for every time we refresh our screens, right? Now you're on to something else, sidetrack. Cardi B gets divorced, but Breonna Taylor, oh, her family got 12 million, but the cops are not, even arrested or charged. So it's a lot of distraction going on, and we have an election coming up, and, you're working and you're trying to do that, code switch and save face, working in publicity. I had to silence my voice because how can I represent you out here, so-called, like they say, acting like a fool, Is it speaking about how I feel, how I really feel acting like a fool? Like, do I say Black too many times if I hashtag it, too many times? Is there such thing as being too Black? My kids aren't interested in anything that I do when it comes to, publicity. It could come to just being a showrunner. It could be anything. They're not interested because they've already met 1 million celebrities, but they're interested in social justice. My mother, is Jamaican and African, and she come from being a Black Panther, and she had the first Black modeling agency in the Pacific Northwest. So she dealt with being dark skinned and not being able to excel in America. But you go overseas, you have all these different opportunities. But here we are, Black in America, right? So we're moving into fall, buying school clothes, even though it's virtual. I got sons, they want hoodies. They don't even understand. From Trayvon Martin, I've been in fear ever since they walk out. You can't wear a hoodie if you're driving, because I have those who are older than 18 now. Don't have your hoodie on if you're driving. Make sure your face is, not constructed. Make sure they can be able to see your face. Make sure you keep your hands, on the wheel. Make sure you don't move. Like, this is really not a good time to gloss over these type of conversations. And so that's why I wanted to join this conversation today, is because, not to, I just wanted to say the things that aren't being said. I'm even afraid when I walk out, like, this is a wig on my head. I have locks, that come down my back. And I know the difference. When I walk into the room with my locks out or in an updo, I'm perceived a certain way. Throw on a little wig. Oh, trust and believe. That does a difference for a Black woman, which is insanity. We have all of these different conversations when it comes to, what's going on in the world right now. And as much as I'm, talking about these specific topics, it's like, imagine how our brain feels, right? It's like a Tetris battle, every day. I live in Seattle, and I know everybody has been seeing these chops and chads. I want to make sure people understand that Black people have always had their plight hijacked. this isn't the time to do that. You know, I just seen on the She Ready radio page, Jane Fonda had to let them know, like, you know, you're talking about police defunding or whatever. Hey, but we're white. Let's stay out of this conversation. Let them handle it. But you do see a lot of our white brothers and sisters out there on the forefront. And I applaud you and I thank you. But when it comes to destruction of property, and when it comes to all that stuff that we would be killed on sight for, it takes away from our plight. It takes away from my son being able to walk down the street or drive just to go get some milk from home or something. So when you are talking about these topics and you're saying and mentioning these people's name, you know what nigger feels like when you're in the room and someone says it and you don't say anything about it. Silence is a part of the problem too. And it's an ugly word, but as long as we understand where it comes from, we can take that power from that, you know? So you also have to understand, for me, I want to make sure my social media presence is my fingerprint in this world. You know, our money isn't good money. You know, I don't want to share everything. I don't want to, you know, just to be doing, like some of the ladies in corporate have talked about. You know, each individual has an opportunity to change that algorithm by sharing their truth, right? And whatever that truth looks like, you know, like the, what I'm looking at, and I thank you for talking about that white privilege, you know, and talking about you as a mother of Black sons, you know. I also have been in an interracial marriage, and my oldest is Hispanic and Black. And even though we're two minorities, this is something that's real deal. It is still a difference. You know, there's still, you know, colorism within our own community, light skin, dark skin. It's so many different facets that we have to go through and navigate. It's just waking up Black. We cannot hang it up. We cannot walk out our doors and act as if you don't see us. Now, it could be as if, you know, my sexuality, you don't see my sexuality unless I tell you my sexuality. But I walk out this door as a Black woman every day. And my sons walk out this door as Black men every day. What's so threatened about Black skin if I'm just walking from the store? If my kid just have a bag of groceries and a hoodie on, but it's November and it's cold. Like, what threatens you in that moment that makes you want to call the police, harm them, say that they're a suspect? Like, you know, you have to ask yourself these questions. Incomes, you know, and sometimes that, like I said earlier, being too Black, right? You want to say things. You want to be able to be like, yo, you know, this isn't right, this isn't this, but you're working at Microsoft, you're working at Amazon and real networks, and you're afraid to really speak out because your job may be in jeopardy, you know, or if you see some type of atrocities and injustices, you can't really speak about it because everybody is monitoring you because you're the Black guy or you're the Black girl, you know. I mean, these things, it's a lot of different pressures, but if we have more platforms like this, if non-Blacks start really talking about things like this, we will have a very different story as we head into election November. If I say anything right now, I just want you guys to not only focus on the presidential election, but focus on your state elections. We have governors running, you know, we have Congress, you know, we have prosecuting attorneys and judges. Like, you know, take care of home first, wherever you are, you know, and look and just Google and see who's all running, you know, outside of what the presidential election looks like. And then look at their body of work and see how that really, you know, works for you and your household. And then for me, what I'm going to be doing here in Seattle, and I'm trying to get other cities to join me, Black women, especially single mothers, is coming November, we're going to be going into whichever local precinct is closest to our homes, and just taking our kids in there, you know, and letting them know, like, hey, there's less of a chance for you to choke out, kneel down, or shoot my kid if you know who this child belonged to, right? So let me walk into your office, your police station, and show you these are my children, This is where we live. If you ever come across them, you can contact me, you know. And I believe having that kind of engagement would be, you know, better than meeting my kid on the street for the very first time. I look forward to, you know, working with you ladies. I know the things that you guys have said. Like I said, I'm up here fixing makeup, I'm crying, I'm fighting back tears now, because this is jam-packed 2 to 3 minutes of insanity that I have to deal with every day. And then I can't live in fear because I'm leading my household, right? And I don't want to hinder them. But when they go to sleep, I'm a wreck, trying to prepare for my next day, trying to make sure that they don't really see any inconsistencies, still build them up and be the battery in their back. But it's definitely difficult to lead when you're so broken. It really is. So thank you, Linda, for this opportunity.
Norman, thank you so much for breaking open for us. I am just so grateful for you and for all of the ladies tonight in sharing with us your real, uncut truths about this issue. It is so incredibly important for us to come together and hear these stories, hear the details, and hear the real experiences. You know, there are a number of places where intervention can take place to address systemic racism, a myriad maybe. Where do you feel that we need to focus as a country?
I want to say, actually, you know, our youth, you know, elementary, starting there for Black youth is, you know, preschool to, you know, prison pipeline pretty much, you know. So having those earlier conversations with kids, because they are not born racist, you know, they run to each other, they play with each other, they color with each other, they, you know, have fun. Just having those conversations now that they are seeing so much, because as parents are working more and stuff, it used to be like your kids are watching PBS or Disney Channel, but you're giving them live devices with the world in their hands. They're connected to the internet, so they're seeing all kind of stuff. They can be watching something cute, but you know, all of a sudden the pop-up, you know, or the next video was something terrible, right? So having those early on conversations with them about race and what it looks like and the differences, which is just skin color, you know, is great. And then to the police academy, I mean, just think about doctors and, you know, lawyers and teachers and all the things that we have to go through, right, in education. But to be a police, what is it, 12 to 18 months, you know? That's not okay. And then, you know, after you're in there, then you don't even know if you have that type of diversity training, right? Or all these different things, but start in the police academy. I mean, they're like the army, right? They're on the ground, they're on the forefront. So start there and make sure in that training that the Blacks and the Mexicans are not just the assailants, and you're not getting over white grandma, right, out of the house, right? Or, you know what I'm saying? Start there, because this is tactical training that they're going to, is embedded in their brain, and that they're going to take on for the rest of their law enforcement careers. So those are my thoughts.
Oh, I was going to say, in terms of for intervention, going back to reading, I love to read. And right now I'm reading The Truths We Hold by Kamala Harris. And next up is Dan Rather's book, What Unites Us. And I think it's just important to broaden our horizon and to hear from calm voices, different life experiences, to gain perspective on the other side. The second point I want to make is, I said it before and I'll say it again, we need the police. I know that being a 10-year domestic violence survivor, I certainly need the police to respond to me when I call. So that's not debatable. But I do think that we need to have some police reforms, because there seems to be a disproportionate amount of Black men in particular subjected to police brutality without accountability. So we need to look at the reform factor and figure out how maybe some more police training, get some more community training and engagement. And I think get back to walking the beat. Police don't walk the beat anymore. When I was growing up, we did know Officer Friendly. He was, familiar to the community. So I think that there needs to be a police presence in the community where it's more engaging, opposed to just policing and driving around, racially profiling their next suspect who's just maybe standing on the corner. He could be tired and look like he's loitering, but he's not. Then suddenly he's picked up and cuffed.
Okay, so my three would be first, the educational system. I think that when you first start school, sometimes that is the first time you have been made aware or just even around other people that are different than you, whether it's just race, religion, other disabilities, but that is the first time that you're integrated into a mini society. Yet when you go to school, even now, the educational system, especially when you get to social issues and social studies, it is still not, it still is not integrated information from various cultures and ethnic backgrounds that exist in our culture. So I think the educational system definitely needs to be reformed because, people are not aware of Asian American history. They're not aware of a lot of African American history. They're not aware of Chinese American history, but we're all Americans just from different ethnic backgrounds, yet our educational system does not reflect that. The second thing I will say is media and communication is definitely, it plays on a lot of biases. When you look at a lot of these, Black Lives Matter and a lot of those things, the way the media, sensationalizes it, it turns into something that it originally was not. And unfortunately, people don't, because we are bombarded with a lot of information, a lot of people don't take the time to read past that or look at the entire video, but they may focus on that headline and make some serious judgments about things and people and situations without really delving deeper to get to the truth of it all. And so my second point was obviously media and communication, not to mention films. There's a lot of African-American films that are popping up to tell the story of the African-American because the general film industry, if you will, was not. And so things are turning, but that's one of the things that definitely needs some serious reform. And then finally, just to piggyback on what Sonia Harris said, police reform is critical. I don't, although that happens in my family, as far as with police, I don't have a negative, I don't have a problem with the police, but I do agree that the police system needs to be reformed because, a typical police officer, when you get that call, they have no idea what they will be reacting to when they get there. Mm-hmm. It could be a mental health issue that they're dealing with. It could be a domestic violence issue they're dealing with. But, you can't be all things to all people, yet that is what we are expecting from our police. And that's not really fair. However, because we have recognized with a lot of disparities in our community that they are not literally equipped to be the jack of all trades, police reform is necessary to what do we want our police and our society to do, and what can we get them, what can we shift to have other experts to do. There was one person that was shot and killed in the street, and it was because he was having a mental bout, but the police officer saw something different. And so the medical expert said that was a mental health issue, yet we are not, the average police officer is not equipped for that. So that's just one example of how police reform is absolutely necessary. And it's unrealistic for our police officers to have that type of weight on them to try to be all things to all people. When we call 911, they're supposed to just run into something, quickly assess the situation, and always make the right decision. And that's not possible, nor is it fair.
These things have not just started because we saw a cop put a neck on George Floyd's, a knee on George Floyd's neck. That just didn't start right now. We all have witnessed or have saw or have heard this going on. And I too need the police to come. When I dial 911, and if I'm in a situation, I do, but I also know having a driver's license, having insurance, having no warrants, when that cop gets behind me, I stress. I breathe heavy. I'm calling my mom and I'm leaving her on speakerphone just because if anything happens to me. Like, that's real. When I call 911 and someone is hurting me, I know that I might be arrested or killed myself. And I'm the one who called. So we have to realize that nothing that we're seeing now is new. And what do we do with that, right? How do we move forward with that? We got kids who are on debate teams that are interested in social justice. You know, Generation Z, we always say right now what's going on with them. They say it contributes to lack of millennial leadership. But, you know, we don't see any more, Martin Luther King's and Malcolm X's. And, you know, we don't see that. Generation Z is going to make a mark. You know, they have no fear, no worry. Everything is out there. But how do you harness that power? How do you direct that power? We have to give them the tools to do so. Community as well as others, you know, but we need more young people and more people of color in these positions to really make change, because I sincerely believe that change comes from the inside.
I was just wondering if we could hear from Tia. You had mentioned starting an affinity group in your corporate environment. How was it getting that started? And then how has it been since, like, maintaining people in the affinity group?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say I've been a part of an affinity group, a high functioning affinity group with multiple legs to it. So I've seen it work very well. For me, I've used that to connect with other people in my company, as well as mentorship, as well as just growth. And even when Lady was talking about like real talk, like having those real talks, having Black women, Black men being able to communicate to me and other Black colleagues on the real things that we need to know and work on, and the real behind the real culture. So I've seen it function at a very high level. So what I did is really take those learnings that I've learned being a part of an affinity group, apply it to our culture, listen. So a part of those 6 weeks of forum, I knew I had the backing to start the affinity group at the beginning because of how people were responding to what was happening. So I wanted to use the 6 weeks to really listen to our people, and then saying, okay, I understand what you want, what kind of space you want to create. And then I built a leadership team with the people that are working on our floor, which is in our commissaries or in our retail shops, build that leadership team so they can be the voice of the majority of the people that's working in the company. The leadership team has been formed for about 2 months. And we have built a calendar of events where they are going to lead a topic once a month, whether or not that's in mental health, whether or not that's in professional development. So like executive presence, or building a resume, or how do you communicate up in the organization, that type of thing, or personal development. And having that group also tell Milk Bar where we should donate our funds to when we are setting aside funds to donate back into the Black community, helping them. Our first general body meeting will be in October. So yeah, I'm looking forward to coming back to these discussions to give an update. But it's been very rewarding for me. And I really do feel like that they are going to be a force for Milk Bar and going to help that company grow in ways that they've never even thought about.
Thank you so much, Tia. Amazing work. And it just makes so much sense, you know. I think that, you know, we've gone a half hour over. I think we could all talk all night. There's so much to talk about. This is such a powerful collaboration, right? Between, you know, we really have to, you know, applaud these speakers for their courageous, sharing of their voice, is that we have to just have our ears open to listening to the truths. And like India said, so we don't have catch-22s, it can be A for effort, but we need to actually make effort that's going to be productive. And that, I think, is has to be a result of listening. I encourage you all to share. There's going to be a recap video of this amazing, out 2 hours at blog.sagelink.com, which is newly up and running, where we'll host all of our recap videos. And I encourage you to share it with your communities, because was a great turnout tonight, but I think so many others could benefit from hearing what we discussed tonight. Along the same lines, I think we need to carry on these conversations. This isn't a moment, and I think that's how we're really going to see this change, is that we need to keep discussing, keep conversing, keep listening, keep changing, and putting these positive energies into constructive ways like we've talked so much about tonight. We are developing on SAYge Link an ability for having post-event connections. We will have all of the participants that were on tonight able to connect with each other on SAYge Link probably by next week. So you'll be getting a notification if you want to reach out and connect further with anyone that you heard from or that was on the event tonight. So I'm really encouraging the continued conversation. So thank you all so much for participating tonight in this really incredibly important event.